What if the Bible's first story conceals a truth so earth-shattering it could redefine your understanding of who you are? Imagine a world before Eden's gates, before Adam's breath, where humans already roamed, built lives, and carried God's image, yet never heard his sacred call. Genesis doesn't begin with a single man and woman. It opens with a mystery. 2 creation accounts, 2 names for God, 2 visions of humanity. One vast and universal, one chosen and intimate. What if Adam wasn't the first human but the first priest, tasked with bridging heaven and earth? What if Cain's fear of unseen people, his wife from an unknown land, his city in a place called wandering, aren't errors but doorways to a divine secret? Prepare yourself, because this exploration of Genesis will unravel truths hidden in its silences. And by the end, you'll see the Bible, and your own purpose, with eyes wide open. The story of Genesis is not a simple chronicle of origins, but a profound tapestry of divine purpose, woven with threads of mystery that challenge our assumptions and beckon us to dig deeper. You've heard it proclaimed countless times. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But what if this beginning holds more complexity than we've been taught? Genesis 1 unfolds a cosmic, poetic vision. God, named Elohim, speaks creation into existence. Light pierces the void, skies stretch wide, seas gather, stars blaze, animals stir, and finally, humans emerge. Not a lone man or woman, but mankind, plural. Let us make mankind in our image, after our likeness, male and female he created them. Genesis 1 verses 26 to 27. These humans are blessed, charged to be fruitful, multiply, and subdue the earth. There's no Eden, no tree, no serpent, just a collective humanity, created to reflect God's image, entrusted with a mandate to fill and steward the world. This is humanity as a species, universal, unnamed, scattered across the earth, bearing God's likeness but not yet his covenant. Then Genesis 2 shifts the perspective. The tone turns intimate, the focus sharpens. God is no longer just Elohim, the universal creator, but Yahweh Elohim, the personal covenantal God whose name is whispered only to those he draws near. He doesn't speak humanity into being. He forms a man from the dust, breathes life into his nostrils, and places him in a specific garden Eden. A woman is crafted, not from the earth, but from the man's rib, signaling a bond of unity and partnership. Why 2 creation accounts? Why 2 names for God? Why 2 methods of creation? This isn't careless repetition or contradiction. It's intentional distinction. Genesis 1 unveils the creation of humanity as a whole, a species designed to mirror God's image across the globe. Genesis 2 zooms in on one man, not the first human but the first called, the first invited into a sacred role. The Hebrew word Adam isn't initially a personal name. It means human or earth being, derived from Adamah, meaning ground. When Genesis declares, Yahweh Elohim formed Ha-Adam from Ha-Adamah, it's not merely poetic. It's a profound revelation. Adam is humanity drawn from the earth but summoned to a divine vocation, set apart for a purpose beyond survival. Eden is no ordinary place. Forget the idyllic image of a tropical paradise with fruit trees and serene streams. Eden is a sanctuary, a temple where heaven kisses earth. Its features mirror later biblical sacred spaces. A river flows from it, splitting into 4, like the life-giving waters in Ezekiel's temple vision. Ezekiel 47. Precious stones, gold, bdellium, onyx, echo the high priest's breastplate in Exodus 28. Cherubim, angelic guardians, stand at its gates after the fall, just as they hover over the Ark of the Covenant in the tabernacle. At Eden's heart stands the tree of life, a symbol of divine presence, akin to the menorah in the tabernacle, its branches shaped like a tree radiating light. Adam's task in this sacred space is to work, *avid*, and keep, *shamar*. Hebrew verbs that don't signify farming but priestly service. These same words appear in Numbers 3:7-8, describing the Levites' duties to serve, *avid*, in worship and guard, *shamar*, the tabernacle's holiness. Adam is no gardener tending crops. He's the first high priest, ordained to steward the meeting place between God and creation, to represent humanity before the divine, to protect the sanctity of this temple amidst the wilds of the world. This role redefines Adam. He's not just the first man but the first covenant-bearer, chosen from a wider humanity to stand in God's presence. Genesis 1's humans are multiplying, filling the earth as commanded, but Adam is set apart, placed in Eden to serve and guard a sacred space. His calling isn't passive existence but active mission, to extend Eden's holiness outward, to bring the knowledge of Yahweh, the covenant God, to a world that knows only Elohim, the Creator. This mission implies a populated world beyond Eden's borders, humans already living, bearing God's image but not his intimate call. Adam's role was to be a bridge, a priest who would carry the divine presence to those outside, inviting them into relationship with Yahweh. But Adam fails. His sin isn't merely eating forbidden fruit. It's a priestly breach. He allows the serpent, a symbol of deception, to infiltrate the sanctuary unchallenged. He remains silent as Eve engages the tempter. The serpent's question, "Did God really say?" Genesis 3 verse 1, isn't about fruit. It's about authority, about who defines good and evil. By choosing autonomy over obedience, Adam and Eve displace God's presence with their own judgment. They don't just break a rule, they defile the temple. Exile follows, not as mere punishment but to preserve Eden's holiness. Cherubim guard the gates, not to curse Adam but to protect the sacred space he failed to keep. Yet God's mercy shines even here. Adam is clothed, not erased, and the covenant endures. This failure establishes a pattern that reverberates through Scripture. God calls representatives: Noah with his altar, Abraham with his vision, Moses on the trembling mountain, David in the holy city, each placed in sacred spaces, tested and tasked with carrying his presence. Adam's story isn't about the first human life but the first covenant, the first invitation to bridge heaven and earth. His fall is cosmic, not personal, because he stood for all humanity. Romans 5 verse 12 declares, "Through one man sin entered the world, not because Adam was the only man, but because he was the priest whose failure disrupted God's plan for sacred relationship." The tragedy of Adam's fall lies in its scope. It didn't just exile him but halted the mission to bring Eden's presence to the world outside. Those humans of Genesis 1, created to multiply and fill the earth, were left waiting for a priest to invite them into God's covenant. A mission postponed but not abandoned. The mystery deepens with Cain, Adam's son, whose story cracks open the narrative's silences. After killing Abel, Cain cries, "Anyone who finds me will kill me." Genesis 4 verse 14. Who is he afraid of? If Adam and Eve were the only humans, followed by their two sons, who are these others? Why does God mark Cain for protection instead of dismissing his fear? Genesis 4 verses 16 to 17 reveals Cain settles in Nod, a land meaning wandering, marries and builds a city. A city demands a population, laborers, planners, dwellers, not a single family. These details point back to Genesis 1's broader humanity, created male and female, multiplying across the earth before Eden's story began. These are not Adam's descendants but humans bearing God's image, living outside Eden's covenant. Cain fears them because they're not bound by the garden's sacred rules. They're human, yes, but uncalled, outside Yahweh's intimate relationship. Nod is a world without Eden's sanctity, a place of exile where humanity lives without the divine presence Adam was meant to share. Cain's fear is not paranoia but a glimpse into a populated world, one that existed alongside Eden, human but not yet invited into the covenant. Yet God's grace pursues Cain. The mark of Cain isn't a curse but a sign of mercy. An ot in Hebrew, the same word used for covenant signs like the rainbow after the flood or the Sabbath in Exodus. It declares, "This man, though guilty, is still mine. Even the first murderer is not abandoned." This flips the narrative. God's justice is real, but his mercy is relentless, extending even to those who wander east of Eden. Cain's city in Nod implies a pre-existing population, a world alive before Eden's story took shape. These people weren't cursed or lesser. They were simply uninvited, bearing God's image but not his covenant. Adam's mission was to bring them into Eden's presence, to expand the temple's boundaries until all humanity walked with God. His failure halted this plan, leaving the world outside waiting for a priest to open the door. This perspective reconciles Genesis 1 and 2. They're not contradictory but complementary. Genesis 1 is about origin, humanity created to reflect God's image across the earth. Genesis 2 is about ordination, one man chosen to represent that humanity in sacred space. Eden wasn't the whole earth but a throne room, a holy of holies where God's presence dwelt. Adam's role was to extend this presence, to teach the unnamed humans of Genesis 1 what it meant to know Yahweh. When he fell, the mission collapsed and Eden was sealed. But God didn't abandon the plan. He called others. Noah with his altar, Abraham with his vision, Moses on the trembling mountain, David in the holy city, each echoing Adam's role, each tested, each carrying the covenant forward. This pattern reveals God's relentless pursuit. He chooses one to stand for many, not because others don't exist, but because one is called to carry the divine promise. Noah faced a flood, Abraham a sacrifice, Moses a wilderness, David a kingdom, each a new Adam, each a step toward restoration. The world outside Eden wasn't empty. Ancient myths whisper of this reality. Sumerian tales speak of the Anunnaki, divine beings who taught early humans. Babylonian stories describe a man made from clay in a paradise called Dilmun. Egyptian accounts tell of a primeval hill rising from chaos where gods walked with men. Even Native American and African traditions recall a time when the divine and human were close, only to be fractured. These could be echoes of the people outside Eden, humans who never knew the garden but carried the memory of a lost sacred age. The Bible doesn't tell their story, not because they didn't exist, but because it traces the covenant line, from Adam to Seth to Noah to Christ. Yet their presence shapes the narrative. Cain's wife, his city, his fear, all point to a populated world, human but uncalled, waiting for the invitation Adam failed to deliver. This wider world wasn't cursed. It was simply outside the sacred space, living without the intimate knowledge of Yahweh that Adam was meant to share. This understanding reshapes our view of humanity's purpose. Eden wasn't meant to be exclusive but expansive. Adam's priesthood was not about hoarding holiness but extending it, transforming the earth into a temple where all could walk with God. His failure didn't just close Eden's gates. It left humanity spiritually orphaned, multiplying without the covenant's light. Yet God's plan persisted. The tabernacle of Moses, with its cherubim-embroidered curtains, was a portable Eden. Solomon's temple, with its tree-like menorah, echoed Eden's design. Even the prophets' visions of a new Jerusalem, with rivers of life flowing from God's throne, Revelation 22, point back to Eden's blueprint. Every sacred space in Scripture is a reminder of what was lost and a promise of what could be restored. Adam's fall was not the end but a delay, a pause in the mission to fill the earth with God's presence. The story finds its climax in Jesus, the last Adam. The Bible weaves a divine symmetry between two Adams, two gardens, two choices. The first Adam, in Eden, chose disobedience, grasping at divinity and bringing death. The second Adam, Jesus, in Gethsemane, chose surrender, praying, "Not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22 verse 42. Adam hid in shame. Jesus stepped forward, declaring, "I am he." John 18 verse 5. Adam blamed his bride. Jesus died for his. Adam's tree brought exile. Jesus' cross, a new tree of life, brought redemption. When Jesus died, the temple veil tore, Matthew 27 verse 51, echoing Eden's gates, reopening access to God's presence. Hebrews 4 verse 14 calls Jesus our high priest, not of Levi but of Melchizedek, eternal and kingly. He didn't just serve in a temple, he became the temple, offering his blood to restore what Adam lost. John 2 verse 19. Where Adam failed to guard the holy, Jesus became the holy, the priest, and the sacrifice. In Eden, Adam reached for the tree of knowledge. In Gethsemane, Jesus embraced the cup of suffering, sweating blood under the weight of the world's sin. His obedience reversed Adam's failure, not just undoing the curse but reopening the way to the tree of life. This restoration is more than theological, it's deeply personal. Adam's role as priest wasn't unique to him. It's a calling passed to us. In Exodus 19 verse 6, God calls Israel a kingdom of priests. In 1 Peter 2 verse 9, believers are a royal priesthood, tasked to guard sacred spaces, our hearts, homes, and witness. Adam's failure isn't our destiny. Jesus' obedience restores our purpose. We're not just forgiven. We're recommissioned to carry God's presence into a broken world. This calling echoes in every act of faith, every choice to honor what is holy. When we forgive, we extend Eden's mercy. When we stand against deception, we guard the temple Adam failed to protect. When we love, we carry the presence Adam was meant to share. The priesthood isn't about robes or rituals. It's about responsibility, about standing between heaven and earth in a world that desperately needs God's light. Science adds another layer to this mystery. Mitochondrial Eve and Y-chromosomal Adam, genetic markers tracing humanity's shared ancestry, suggest a population, not a single couple. Genesis isn't a biology textbook but a revelation of purpose. It doesn't explain DNA but unveils destiny. Adam wasn't the first formed but the first chosen, a priest pulled from a wider humanity to carry God's covenant. Science confirms our unity, one family, one origin, echoing Acts 17 verse 26. From one man he made all the nations. The Bible and science aren't enemies. They're partners, one tracing the mechanics of creation, the other its meaning. Genesis doesn't tell us how cells formed but why souls long for eternity, why we ache for a world without death, why beauty stirs us to worship. These are covenantal questions, answered not in laboratories but in the story of a God who calls us from dust to destiny. The people outside Eden, uncalled but not unloved, remind us of God's expansive grace. Cain's fear, his wife, his city, all point to a world already alive, bearing God's image but outside his covenant. Their stories, though untold in Scripture, live in the shadows of ancient myths, from Sumerian tales to Egyptian legends, whispering of a time when the divine was near. These people weren't enemies of God but strangers to his call, waiting for a priest to bring them into the sacred. Adam's mission was to be that priest, to expand Eden until all earth was a temple. His fall left them in darkness, but God's plan didn't end. The covenant continued through Seth, Noah, Abraham, and beyond, each a new Adam, each a step toward redemption. This redemption finds its fullness in Jesus, who didn't just restore Eden but transformed it. The cross became a new tree of life, its leaves, as Revelation 22 verse 2 says, for the healing of the nations. Jesus didn't just reopen the garden. He planted it within us, making every believer a temple of the Spirit. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 19. The torn veil wasn't just a historical moment. It was a cosmic invitation, beckoning us to walk with God again. Every altar, every tabernacle, every temple in Scripture was a shadow of Eden, a reminder of what was lost and a promise of what could be. Jesus fulfilled that promise, not by building a physical temple but by becoming the living sanctuary, where heaven and earth meet once more. You stand at the crossroads of two Adams, two gardens, two destinies. The first Adam's shadow, fear, shame, autonomy, whispers in us all, urging us to hide, to grasp control, to stitch fig leaves over our failures. But the last Adam, Jesus, offers a brighter path. Grace, surrender, purpose. You're not doomed to wander east of Eden, lost in Nod's exile. You're called to walk with God, to guard the sacred spaces of your life, your heart, your home, your witness, and to carry his presence into a world still yearning for the invitation Adam lost. From Genesis to Gethsemane, the Bible tells one story. God pursues the fallen, marks the guilty with mercy, and calls the wanderer home. Every choice is a garden moment. Will you reach for your own knowledge or kneel at the cross? You're not merely a survivor of a broken world. You're a priest in a restored one, tasked with building a new Eden, not of earth but of eternity. The door is open. The veil is torn. The tree of life grows within you. What will you choose?